What is guitar tab? Tablature, or tab, is a method for notating music that indicates instrument fingerings instead of musical pitches. Though most of us think of guitar tab when we hear the word tablature, this method for notating music first appeared as far back as the year 1300, when it was used for notating organ music. Tablature became common during the Renaissance and Baroque periods, and since then, tab has been used for many other instruments such as harmonica. But tab is especially common these days for fretted stringed instruments such as guitar and bass. Traditional, or what we call standard, music notation represents pitch and duration for each note by placing a note symbol on a staff. The lines and spaces on the staff indicate the 12 pitches in the Western music system. A weakness is that standard notation doesn't indicate where or how the note is played on the instrument, just that a note should be played at a certain pitch at a certain time, with a certain duration, and perhaps with a performance articulation for that note, such as staccato or an accent and so on. But this lack of information on how to perform a specific note, how to play a specific note on an instrument, is an instrument-specific disadvantage, particularly for guitars. Standard notation has evolved and been developed over centuries and provides a very complete picture of how music should be performed. To explain further, with the guitar and other fretted instruments, one of the challenges with standard notation is that there can be as many as 5 or 6 places where a given pitch might be played on the instrument. For example, on guitar, the note E at the top of the standard notation staff can be played with the first string open, the second string at the 5th fret, the 3rd string at the 9th fret, the 4th string at the 14th fret, and so on. Each of these fingerings provides the same pitch, though the tone of the note may vary at each location. With classical guitar standard notation, position indicators, which tell the player where to play on the neck for a passage, as well as fretboard fingering indications telling which finger to be used to hold a note, are sometimes added to the notation to help the player understand how to perform a given passage. Guitar tablature, on the other hand, uses lines to represent the strings on the instrument, 1 line per string. This allows tab to be used to cover everything from 4-string bass to 8-string guitar and even beyond. Numbers placed on the lines indicate which frets the player's fingers should be placed on to sound each note. You could say it's a diagrammatic or an operational approach to music notation rather than a representative approach. Tablature can be used as an adjunct to standard notation, and in that case it's basically giving a diagram of how the standard notation should be fingered. In this case, the tab may not include rhythmic duration, since the duration is indicated in the accompanying standard notation. Or tab can stand alone without accompanying standard notation. In this case, there may be rhythm and duration symbols added to the tab. But if tab does include those rhythm and duration symbols, then reading it becomes much more like reading standard notation. You need to be able to read and understand those symbols for different note lengths and so on. Various other symbols can also be attached to the tablature to indicate articulations and performance techniques specific to an instrument or musical style, such as vibrato, slides between notes, bends, hammer-ons, pull-offs, and more. Now, reading tab is fairly straightforward once you understand the concept, which makes it great for everyone from beginners to pros. Let's look at an example of tab for 6-string guitar. The 6 horizontal lines indicate the 6 strings of the guitar. The bottom line is the low E, or 6th string. The top line is the high E, or 1st string. So this follows the way the strings are aligned when you look down on the neck: E, A, D, G, B, and E. Numbers are placed on the lines to indicate which fret and which string to play, with a 0 indicating an open string. For example, a 2 on the second line from the top indicates that you should put your finger on the 2nd fret of the 2nd or B string, which produces the note C sharp. Numbers arrayed horizontally left to right across the tab indicate a series of notes that should be played consecutively, one after another. For example, this is an A major scale played on the 3rd or G string. Numbers stacked vertically above one another on the tab are to be played simultaneously and indicate a chord or interval to be played. In this example, this stack of numbers indicates an open C major 7 chord. The X on the bottom string indicates that that string should not be played. Various articulations can also be added to the tab. A diagonal line between 2 numbers on the same string indicates a slide between those notes. This example shows a slide from the 7th fret to the 10th fret on the 4th string. An arc connecting 2 numbers on the same string indicates a hammer-on or pull-off. Here we're hammering on from the 8th fret on the 1st string to the 10th fret on the 1st string. A curved arrow is often used to indicate string bending, a wavy line indicates vibrato, a T above a note might indicate tapping with a picking hand finger, and so on. There are many potential articulations and performance directions that can be added to tab. But this brings us to one of the weaknesses for tab. It's not standardized. Each publisher or composer or guitarist may have their own set of symbols to indicate various things in the tab. Other weaknesses for tab include displaying rhythms and durations, as we talked about earlier, and indicating dynamics as well. It's also difficult to see musical relationships with tab. For example, you can quickly see intervals between notes when reading standard notation. But with tab, the numbers don't give a direct display of what the intervals and other relationships are among the notes. But perhaps the biggest weakness for tab is that it's specific to a particular instrument versus standard notation, which is universal. Any instrument or voice can read the same standard music notation. A part composed on a piano but written down in standard notation can be read by any musician regardless of their instrument. But with tab, if you create a guitar part written in tab, only a guitarist will be able to read and play it. Finally, someone experienced at reading standard notation can look at sheet music and mentally create a picture of how that music will sound, but this is much more difficult with tab. On the positive side, it's easy to learn to read tab, and you get direct instructions from the tab on how to finger and play each particular note, chord, or part. And a big plus is that tab reads the same regardless of the tuning of the instrument. A guitar tuned to an open tuning or with drop strings uses exactly the same tab as a standard tuned guitar. The tab is showing you where to place your fingers on the strings to get certain notes, not displaying the pitches that should be played, regardless of how the guitar is tuned. This makes tab way easier to read for altered and drop tunings in standard notation. Tab also makes it easier to see performance indications and articulations, such as bending, that are challenging to represent in standard notation. This has made tab very popular for notating and transcribing rock, metal, country, and other styles of modern music. Tab works equally well for acoustic and electric instruments and for all genres and styles. These days, there's really no reason not to know how to read and write tab. It's a very simple system that you can quickly learn and put to work for creating and learning music. Knowing how to read tab will give you access to tons and tons of pieces of music and transcriptions, and many of them are free. I do still recommend that you learn to read standard notation at least a little bit. And in fact, my favorite form of guitar notation combines standard notation and tablature together. Having both and being able to understand both gives you the best of both worlds and provides a complete picture of how guitar music should be performed. If you want to learn more about audio and music concepts like this, visit the News and Research page at sweetwater.com or check out the other videos in our Glossary Terms playlist.